Welcome to the inaugural RavenFist Studios podcast.
You sure you want him sitting across from you?
I don't know what I want at this point.
I'm sorry. Oh, boy.
Everything is awesome.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Welcome to the RavenFist Studio podcast. This is our inaugural episode, so I'm not really sure how things are going to go, but we're going to try this out, and invariably we're going to get better at it as we go along. But the point of this is RavenFist Studio are three individuals who are endeavoring to become another indie dev studio. So we're working on a couple of games right now, and then around that, we want to build some content that we can share about video games, about the state of the market, about the industry, various things like that. Whatever topics come to our mind, those are the kind of things that we're going to talk about. My name is Chris, and who do I have across from me?
This is Matt.
And then to my left,
Stacy.
All right. Today's episode is all about video game music. I don't know that you would necessarily call these deep cuts, but I went for some of my favorite cuts of video game music. I've got samples that we can listen to and analyze. And just for the listeners out there, Matt and Stacy do not know what selections I have picked. They did not listen to these prior to now. We're going to be playing these live in the studio and getting reactions and getting discussion and analysis. So without further ado, let's discuss the first piece of music, which is Zone J from Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers. That was a track from a game. First of all, either of you played Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers on the NES?
I think so. I think I played it a long time ago.
That would be a negatory.
Okay. So, are you aware of the cartoon Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I am.
Fantastic. So, as a piece of music, let's start there. What did you think of that track?
Reminded me of passing a Casio shop in the mall.
Circa 1986.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it definitely has that sound to it that takes you back to, that generation of where you're stopping in and playing video games in the arcade after you get home from school or something like that.
You think that's a sign of the times, or do you think that was like an intentional choice by composer?
I think it's probably a sign of the times, because I think at the time that the music was composed, I wouldn't imagine the composer had the idea that we would look back on that as being such an important part of that generation. I don't think that they realized that video games were going to turn into the cultural icon and phenomenon that they have.
Interesting.
Well, I can't help but wonder, technical limitations of these games. It's kind of like they had to work with what they had to work with. And so, them not probably thinking that, years in the future, now we can have a full soundtrack and just making this music work for those games back then. I don't know.
That is an interesting observation, because maybe not so much with Zone J from Chippendale's Rescue Rangers, but some of these tracks that we're going to listen to, I would think the same thing. Like, I would think that they would be like, oh, this is just a day job. This is just, a video game, and we're making these and we're selling these, and it's a thing that people are into right now. But how many people are really taking like the aesthetic of this is a work of art and doing something with it from that perspective? But there are a surprising number of these tracks, even from the NES era, where, in my opinion, it really does elevate to that form. And it's interesting that number one, you would pick up on that, but then number two, that it does kind of defy convention, and it does kind of defy that idea. Interesting to note about this track, it differs from the rest of the score for Chippendale's Rescue Rangers. If you listen to the rest of that score, it's all very just kind of blasé music. It just kind of flows along with the video game. It's the kind of soundtrack that you would either not remember, or you would mute your TV and then put on a cassette tape or something while you were playing it. But this Zone J is the second to the last level of the game, and I think that the music has kind of that penultimate quality to it. Did you kind of notice that theme that's interwoven?
It kind of had a I don't want to use the term frantic, but you could tell that it, at least to me, it sounded like music that was going to be played at a very important stage or time in the video game. By the pace of it, you could tell that, the pressure was kind of amping up in the game.
It's climactic.
Yeah.
I can't say that right. But
yeah, it really does kind of have that quality to it, and that is exactly where it plays during the game. So, I think it's a very successful piece of music for that. Harumi Fujita was the composer for Chippendale Rescue Rangers. So he also did the score for Bionic Commando and for Strider, for several other video games of those NES era. So he was, well represented in that time of video game music. All of those games that I just mentioned were Capcom video games. He was not exclusive to Capcom. He did some other scores, but those are kind of the most notable ones that he did. So one of my personal favorite tracks, there will be days where I will just loop that one track for hours on end while I'm working or trying to get something done or driving in the car. I really like it.
Now I see what's wrong with you.
That's fair. That's fair. I am probably the only one in the group who actively listens to video game music in such a way. But I didn't discover this until much later in life, because as a kid with Chippendale Rescue Rangers, I played it a ton, but I wasn't that good at video games as a youngster, so I never got to that zone. So it was only as an adult going back to it that I played through the game, and immediately upon getting to that zone, I was like, whoa, this music, it just got real. It totally changed from the tone of the rest of the game, and it's been one of those tracks that's just kind of stuck with me. So, all right, moving on to the next track. This is the opening theme from Mega Man 2. Now, people who are listening who know a lot about video game soundtracks, this is going to be old hat to them. This is one of those tracks that people point to when they're like, video game music is legit, and then they were like, Mega Man 2 theme, enough said. And there's some truth to that, but let's go ahead and listen to it and see what you guys think. So that was the main title for Mega Man 2, composed by Takashi Tateishi. So he composed the score for Mega Man 2. That is the main theme. Unique in some of our selections, as it does have a clear beginning, middle, and end. Most video game music is built to loop continuously, and that one it does not. It obviously comes to a conclusion. So for me, my take on that Mega Man 2 theme is, I think it is masterclass in electronic dance music. If I were in a modern club and that came over the speakers, my first thought would be, what am I doing in this club? And my second thought would be, yeah, that feels about right. What did you guys think?
For me, that was the sound of despair as I load up a game that there's no way and no chance of me ever beating it. I do remember that pretty vividly.
Okay, so Matt's going deep in his psyche with his Mega Man 2 experiences.
Well, honestly, for me, not sure exactly what it was about it, but it kind of reminded me of neoclassic heavy metal because you could hear the change up in the music, and you can tell somebody put a lot of time into it, just making the changes in the piece, and you could feel the pressure, and just, I don't know, it kind of took me in a completely different direction than the first piece of music did.
Yeah, and just to give you the context for the game, I mean, when you load up Mega Man 2, you see the title screen, you see Mega Man standing on top of a building looking awesome, and that's the background music. So it's, that's playing over the press start, kind of screen. And it's action, it's quick paced, it's got a very fast tempo, it's getting you ready for the challenge that awaits you. And Mega Man 2 is a very challenging game.
It did feel more mature or something than the Chippendales one. I don't know. There's just something, maybe that's not the right word, but do you guys get what I'm saying?
I think that's a perfect word. And I think that kind of goes to show how much care these composers put into the video game music even at this time, because Chippendale Rescue Rangers is geared to a completely younger audience than Mega Man 2 was. And so you've got that kind of Saturday morning cartoon feel going on through the Chippendale score, but Mega Man 2, it's completely different. It's more robotic, it's more action, it's all of those things that come with that game.
Electro Dance Club.
Yes, exactly right. What am I doing in this club? But hey, at least they're playing Mega Man's theme. So our next track is also from Mega Man 2, and you're just going to have to indulge me with this one, because even though the title's great, it's not my favorite cut from the Mega Man 2 soundtrack. In fact, this one is from the Bubble Man stage. But I think I don't know. To me, this is like a high art kind of track here. So we'll have to see what you guys think. My son is really into electronic music, and I played this for him with the preface, "This will change your life," and he wasn't impressed. What do you guys think?
How old is he again?
He's 13. Nothing I say at this point is interesting.
Yeah, I do feel like you got to have some age under your belt in order to appreciate some of this stuff, because, as a kid, you hear these things, and it's part of the game, and it might be kind of cool, but honestly, you don't care that much. But then as we get older, here we sit talking about just the music.
Well, and as you get older and more mature, you think about the artistry as well. Pardon me. You think about the artistry as well, and that's one thing that just amazes me about video game music, is this could have been something that was just so easily a throwaway job. And here you get these guys that are composing real songs. And Matt, you spoke earlier about the limitation of the technology. The NES sound chip is not incredible. It's 4 channels, if I remember right. So you've only got 4 different sounds that you can work with at a time. You have different sine waves. So it's not even like you're composing with an instrument. It's like you're composing with a graph essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you're placing these different sine waves in the order that you want them to be played, and still you can result in something like that Bubble Man theme.
You pretty much had to be an artist in order to even make it work, I feel like. I mean, the limitations were such. I mean, and that goes even for video games in that era in general. I mean, all the little tricks and tweaks and things that they had to do behind the scenes, and music included. I mean, you had to be an artist just to make that work, and to have it come out as well as it did is nothing short of amazing in most cases.
Very true.
Well, and I think, like you pointed out, Chris, this is a whole genre that can easily be overlooked because there are similarities in the limitations, but when you really delve down into this and you start to listen to, the way that these were composed and in spite of those limitations, you've got, we've had 3 pieces so far that have been very different in the type of mood that they set and the thoughts that I know for myself that I've had when I've heard each piece. So, I think that, we really owe, this art form some time to go back and look at it and listen to it and appreciate it. Because, I mean, as a kid, you're popping those quarters in the machines, or you're at home on your NES and, you know what Pac-Man sounds like, what Mario sounds like, but you get into all these other games and they are completely different from what, they're completely different and unique all in their own way.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think we're getting to a point where it is being appreciated a lot more. I mean, in the last 5+ years or so, the idea of a retro gaming community has really come into fruition, and it's really become its own thing. And now you're starting to see companies who will take video game soundtracks and they'll go to the original hardware and the original chips, and then they'll record them and master them to vinyl. And you can buy them, that way.
So how many of those albums do you have, Chris?
We're not going to talk about that. That's a different podcast. But anyway, the fact that people will take that much time and that much effort and that much care to preserve these scores, I think you're starting to see that appreciation come out a little bit. All right, so
before we move on, I have a question.
Yeah.
So with the Mega Man soundtracks, and I'm probably the one with the least amount of knowledge, compared to you guys. Do they all have that percussive? Have you noticed that? Like, there's always a percussive, like, either that or like a laser sound, lasers, which totally goes with Mega. Yeah, pshum, pshum. But both of those songs, like, there is a constant, like, percussive beat, and I just wonder.
I think that's more indicative of NES. Honestly, as opposed to Mega Man. I think that you can make that connection a lot easier with Mega Man because, it is a robot character that you're dealing with and that kind of thing.
With a laser arm.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, I'm just kind of just talking out of the side of my mouth here for a moment because I don't directly know the answer to your question. Mega Man 2 is the Mega Man soundtrack I am most familiar with. So that would be an interesting thing to look at, but my gut tells me that if you analyzed any NES soundtrack, you would kind of see that become a thing because those are the types of sounds you're dealing with to compose NES music. Mm-hmm. But hey, who knows? Maybe we'll do that someday. We'll go through all 11 Mega Mans.
You can just strike that question. That's fine.
Now the seed is planted. All right. So we got one more title from the 8-bit era. And then we'll move into some 16-bit stuff. But this is the Stage 1 theme from Batman for the NES. And if you have known me for any time or read any of the content that RavenFist has produced, Batman on the NES is one of my all-time favorites. So here is the Stage 1 music. So that was a longer clip than we have used before because it takes that song over a minute before it loops back on itself. And so, it's a little bit more sophisticated than some of the other tracks that we've listened to. There's a lot more going on there. It was composed by Naoki Kodaka, and is just a brilliant score from top to bottom. Stage 1 happens to be my favorite. There may be a little bit of nostalgia there because I spent so much time trying to beat Stage 1 of Batman as a child. But the rest of the score is just as good. And in what was probably a limitation in the production, when you get to the last level of Batman on the NES, where you're climbing the cathedral to fight the Joker, it just reuses the Stage 1 music because they probably didn't have enough money or time to do another track. But that's fine with me because it's my favorite. So I'm like, oh, we're back to the Stage 1 music. Yeah, let's go.
It's come full circle.
Thoughts?
I hear that music and it just, I'm in that first level of that game, and I think it's just, part of the identity of that particular game. I think it's well done, and I think that the music, if you're playing through that level, fits the pace of kind of the waves of enemies you're going through. So I think it's well done.
It is very well married to the game, and you can say that about the entire score for Batman, from the opening theme music with the way the visuals coincide with the beats of the music, and the different kind of segments that are to that game. It really does go hand in hand. You're right, it is difficult to separate the two. Matt's nodding his head.
I am Batman.
I don't wear hockey pants.
It's a helicopter.
I think it's a helicopter.
That's what I said.
All right, if you don't know what we're talking about, go look up College
It's okay,
Humor.
we don't either.
That's true.
All right, so
I enjoyed the music. It was awesome. It was very Batman-y. I don't have very many memories of that game, because if you guys had that much trouble with it, I probably just got frustrated and said meh, and went on to something else. Like
I think we're something like Battletoads. Okay,
we all know how that goes.
I'm going to move on from a hard game to a game that punishes me for playing it.
Yeah.
Okay. Outstanding. Well, great. We're going to carry on this Batman theme as we move into the 16-bit era with some Sega Genesis music. And Sega Genesis music is a bit of a touchy subject in video game music circles because there are some people that absolutely swear by the sound chip of the Sega Genesis, and there are some people that are like, that's garbage. There is nothing good that comes out of that. And to be fair, there is a lot of garbage in the Sega Genesis music library. But it kind of came down to, if you were a composer that understood what was happening and you understood how to use that hardware, you could make some amazing things happen with the Sega Genesis sound chip. And this is an amazing thing. This is a bit of a longer clip, so bear with me. And then afterwards, I want to talk a little bit about how it works within the game. And I don't think either of you have played this game, so we'll see how it goes. But this is the introduction Arkham Asylum breakout theme from the Adventures of Batman and Robin for the Sega Genesis. So that track goes on for 9 more minutes, and it'll melt your face off if you listen to the whole thing at once, I think. I mean, it is the most crazy music. Like, later in the track, I swear there's like the sound of a copy machine that's just going back and forth. I don't know what's going on with that track, but I know I love it, okay? And that was composed by a gentleman named Jesper Kyd, who went on to compose the first 4 Assassin's Creed games. He went on to compose Borderlands 1 and 2, and many other games. I mean, so this guy's got, yeah. I mean, he's got a future ahead of him when he's doing this Sega Genesis Batman and Robin game. And I will tell you that for my 2 cents, I love the soundtrack. I will listen to the soundtrack all the time. It does not work with the game. It is so disconnected from what's happening in the game that it's kind of unbelievable that anyone making this game, when they were like, "Hey, Jesper, what do you got for us? Let me hear the score," they were like, okay. I mean, I can't. I would love to have been there for that conversation, because it's so disjointed from the game that even like on the title screen where it's like press start, like when you press start, the music doesn't stop. It's so driving that it's like the music's like, I don't care if you press start or not, I'm playing. You got 9 more minutes of this. What did you think?
So, I mean, what makes the game so different? Like, because I haven't played that game. So.
Okay, good question. So it's the Adventures of Batman and Robin, which means it's based on the Batman cartoon. The Tim Sims, is that his name?
Yes, I believe so.
I'm gonna have to look that up. Anyway, whoever it was, Sims doesn't sound right. Anyway, the Batman the Animated Series cartoon, which in its later seasons they changed to the Adventures of Batman and Robin, and it's, I mean, absolutely stunning animation, fantastic cartoon, but it's based on that property. So it's a very hand-drawn animation style. It's the same show that you would have watched when you got home from school in the evenings as a kid. And that show itself is like very 1920s. It's very neo-noir. And so then putting this like face-melting electronic industrial soundtrack to it, I don't know where that came from, but I love it.
The industrial, and then those high notes. I was just like, like my eye starts twitching. I'm just like, what's happening?
Honestly, when I'm hearing it, I'm thinking Terminator. I could totally see that being the soundtrack for a Terminator video game. Maybe Aliens. I mean, it just seemed like it had that kind of techno urgency to it. I mean, I kind of don't. I just was not envisioning Batman.
No,
but it's an awesome track.
Did they use that somewhere in Far Cry Blood Dragon with like a T-Rex shoot lasers out of his eyes?
Perfect. That's a perfect marriage for that.
Yeah, but you put that with the Batman and Robin visuals, it's such a disconnect. And I actually have the game, and I'll just put the cartridge in and just hit the power and just let it play.
And especially if you're saying that goes with a video game that is, in the vein of the Batman animated series, because that has such a Art Nouveau, kind of feeling to it. So
it's a disconnect.
Art Deco. It just doesn't really marry with that to me.
You're absolutely right. All right, this next track is another face melter. It's another Genesis. And it's bizarre. I don't know what else to say. This is Crazy Train from Streets of Rage 3, not to be confused with the Ozzy Osbourne song.
Dang. I got excited for a second.
Sharon!
Co- composed by Yuzo Koshiro and Motohiro Kawashima, it actually uses what has been come to be known as indeterminate music. And what that means is that elements of the composition are introduced through random chance.
Okay.
How many kittens were harmed in the making of that?
They will not publish those results.
What was that for?
That was for Streets of Rage 3. So it's a brawler, like in the vein of Double Dragon. So you're walking through a like semi 3D kind of like multi-leveled video game as the Streets of Rage dude, and you're just beating the crap out of people while that plays.
Is it
I'm
cat
familiar
people?
with the game,
Okay, yeah.
but I don't really remember that soundtrack.
Well, Streets of Rage 1 and 2 have much more like middle of the road kind of soundtracks. I mean, they're all kind of harsh and techno-y and that kind of thing, but this whole like randomness that was introduced.
Nose harp and butt trumpet.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is unique to Streets of Rage 3, and the composers were actively trying to be like, well, let's break the mold here. Let's do something new.
I believe they did.
Yeah.
They broke more than the mold.
Like, to me, it's like if the Tron soundtrack had been composed by David Bowie circa 1995. Like, that is what that sound was.
That
to
is
me.
an amazingly accurate analogy.
All right, so we're not huge fans of the Streets of Rage 3 score. I mean, it's an experience. I'll say that. To sit and listen to that score from beginning to end with all the different levels, it's something. It's like it's one of those things where either you're like, I'm never going to do that again, you'll grow to like it, or you'll like have a psychedelic experience halfway through.
Yeah, I was going to say. It definitely seemed like you needed some assistance.
Fair enough. All right, I got one more track for you guys, and then you can get out of here. We're going back to the NES for this one. And I picked this track because it's very different from any of the other tracks that we've talked about before. My tastes and proclivities are kind of more into the science fiction kind of things. You know, we had Mega Man, we had Batman, we had some different samplings there. This one, I'm not going to tell you what the game is first. I want you to listen to the track, and I want you to tell me what kind of emotions and thoughts it evokes. Okay? Here we go. What do you get from that?
Ha! We got the funk. Totally George Clinton.
It's got a funky vibe to it, yeah.
KC's Sunshine Band. I don't
Whatever
know.
the heck those bongo things were. I mean, man, that's a party right there. If there's not people dancing and smiling to that, yeah, something wrong with you.
Yeah, maybe a little Lionel Richie, you know.
All right. No, it's interesting that those are the influences that you picked out of it. I think you're absolutely right. That is the first stage music from the NES game The Adventures of Bayou Billy.
Okay.
Yeah. And so you can kind of see, like what you're hearing is funk. Now you can kind of hear it as like, oh, okay, Louisiana, swampy, kind of.
Yeah.
It's got that kind of feel to it. You know, and it's an interesting way to spin NES music. You know, I mean, a lot of the tracks we've listened to have been very like technologically based, very techno-y, and this has, you know, however you want to look at that. It's got that George Clinton funk vibe, or it's got that Louisiana bluegrass kind of vibe going on to it as well. And the fact that you can get both types of sounds out of this 8-bit video game machine, I think it's marvelous. And if you really want to have a good time, look up Adventures of Bayou Billy music covers. And there are people going crazy on YouTube with like banjos and everything. And it is, man, that's a fun trip to have. So that's a good time. do that search and enjoy that.
That's awesome.
So what do you guys think? Our first exploration into video game music.
Very cool.
You're opening.
Yeah. I mean, I know personally, going back to that retro genre, there's a lot of music that gets overlooked, and I'm glad, even if it's a very small part, maybe bring a little attention to that and bring people in to realize that it is an art form, and that there is a lot of unique music, and there was thought and time that was put into that being an important part of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, depending on how you guys listening to this like it, or how we feel coming down the road a little bit later, we can put together more tracks. We can do analysis like this in the future. I mean, we only hit NES and Sega Genesis from these two, so we've got tons more music.
So next up, Skyrim.
Oh, wow, we're jumping straight. I prefer the Morrowind score.
Oh, fine.
All right.
We prefer the Morrowind game.
That's true. I do. Maybe that'll be a podcast. Which Elder Scrolls is the best, and we'll just fight to the death.
I don't know.
Could be fun.
Hey, well, there's a lot of stuff to cover there.
I think we should have a podcast or video of Stacy playing Morrowind and attempting to kill a crab.
Does it have a lot of platforming in it?
No.
No, unless you get the that jump scroll from the very beginning and decide to go ahead and use it.
Yeah, it could be a long podcast. So.
All right. Well, we'll figure out what we do next. And as always, we just keep producing content as we think of it. And it's just something we enjoy doing. It's just something that we want to give back to all of you out there. And as we spend most of our day, actually making a video game and trying to get that to the point that we can talk about that and release it, then there's all this history that we can also talk about and be a part of that conversation. So that's what we look forward to doing. That's what we enjoy doing. And that was our goal of doing this. So hopefully you found some value in it too. And this is Chris, Stacy, and Matt with RavenFist Studios, and until next time. We hope you enjoyed this RavenFist Studio podcast. Please visit RavenFist.com to see other content that we have created about video games. We have many analysis through podcasts, blog posts, and our YouTube channel, as well as discussion about game development and the work that we're currently doing as a studio. Again, that's RavenFist.com. Until next time.